when we have class participation, which is going to be increasing as we go along, be a regular part of it. I know it was in the class that I grew up in for different parts. I decided of all the parts of building a sermon outline, I wanted to spend the bulk of our initial time on building an outline. The content obviously is going to be very important for us as we move forward, and we'll start critiquing that more. Unless someone just puts up blatant heresy here, I think we'll be fine. And your ultimate outline will be unique to you. The style, we'll try to stick somewhat close to it. It may not use the Roman numerals, I'll give you that, but let's at least use the indentation type thing. It's easy for the eye to follow. Anything further to the left's a main point. It kind of gives you the scope of what you're about to talk about. And then we narrow down the scope a little bit. We may have two or three or four of these subpoints. So it's a main point. You've gotten a text. You're going through what are some of the main subjects being discussed. What are they? I might see 3, I might see 4, I might see 2, I might see 1. If I see 1, odds are then that's my title, and then I want to break down what I want to say about that, what I think the text says, and there is a degree of what I want to say about it, as long as the text supports it. We don't want to stretch the text to fit our outline. We want to stretch our outline to fit the text. Does that make sense? We're always keeping in mind which is the greater authority here. The text is not subservient to our outline. Well, I got a clever outline and I want to build it out here. On your little handout here today, some of these will be very brief because most of what we're going to be doing is going to be covering over these in class. So we're going to start with here in just a moment the homework. We're going to review it. That's outlining Colossians 2, 6 through 8. How did you outline it? What were your main points? Did you come up with 2 or 3 key things about that text, out of the text the best you can that you want to say? Some have asked, and it's a good question, what if I go out of order? Nothing wrong with going out of order as long as you go back and demonstrate what the actual order was in the text. I do that sometimes where I'll jump to the end of something, start with that, and then go backward and then make my point that way. So I asked you first to create a title. There's where you can be creative. Some people have come up with some very unique titles. There was a guy, it used to be used all the time when I was growing up, that everybody just loved this title by a guy named R.G. Lee, and a very well-known Southern preacher, and his sermon title was Payday Someday. Now, if I remember right, his texts were varied. So a lot of people do textual sermons, and I'm not a huge fan of just textual sermons. In other words, they go choose a text. That's what Spurgeon did. He was a man who would go choose a text and then break it down and then preach it, and a lot of his sermon prep was done the night before. Charles Spurgeon, as much as we admire so much about him, was not a good example to us as far as sermon preparation. So just remember that if you ever hear things about him. I'm not trying to put him down, but that's a rare thing. And it would have been nice, some of us have bemoaned the fact that we don't have anything that he goes through and thoroughly does verse by verse. Closest I have, it's a treasured book, and I will start doing this very soon. I'll start pulling in every once in a while a resource that I use and recommend it. You can write it down. It's a possibility if some of you want to get in the future, and I'll keep building on that. But I do have in my library, it's one of my prized possessions, a first edition of Spurgeon's commentary on Matthew, where he essentially went verse by verse through the text. He died before he finished it, so his wife finished compiling his notes in the order that he had been going through it, Susanna Spurgeon. So first, create a title, a few words to describe the overall focus of the presentation. Have at least 2 main points, which I'm going to have our men come up and write out their main points and subpoints. Don't be nervous about the critiquing of it. You can be a little nervous about your handwriting, I suppose, because if we can't read it, it's really hard. But it's okay. Most of us can work through that there. So at least 2 points, preferably more, and then work out at least 2 subpoints underneath each one. So you've got a main point, subpoint, and then you've got, and I recommend then that you have more tertiary points. If you look at my outlining style in my notes, which is Sunday after Sunday, Wednesday after Wednesday, you'll notice I spend most of my time here. Most of my time here. I have it as a discipline for myself that I'm going through a text. I have a high-level outline I start with in my head, and then I break out part of that into a main point. I live and breathe by my main points. So I want to know, as I'm going through major portions of text, what are my main points throughout? And they're mine, how I want to come at it. Most of the time it'll follow pretty logical. We have a lot of helps in our Bibles. You ever notice they'll break paragraphs down, or they'll break it down by section? Oftentimes those are really good breaks, but don't depend on those. Plenty of times I really disagree with where those are broken. Even to some degree, verse breakdowns aren't quite there. Sometimes you'll have people say, this one goes from verse 1 through verse 3a. Ever seen that? It means they mean the first part of verse 3. And then starting the next point, 3b through verse 10. They'll have something like that. That's okay. You're just trying to make sure you're staying true to the text. That'll help you explain what the text is saying and then apply it. So I have a main point, our subpoint, tertiary point, and I spend most of my time, you'll notice my little a, little b, little c, little d, are where I spend most of my time. This is a time where I've worked through the structure, and now I'm just talking it through. I'm thinking it through. I'm illustrating it here. I'm doing cross-references, and then you know my ultimate cheat. This is for me, and you can mimic it if you want. If I get something and I just don't think quite fits here, but I think sheds light on it, or it's another thought I want to make about that I don't necessarily see where it fits well in here, I'll put a little text box off to the left, and we'll use that to then make my point, okay? So it works for me. I love spending all my time in here. I find myself obsessed working my way through points, and then I'll think, what's my next tertiary point going to be? And the next tertiary point is going to be. Then once I've done that and I've done all the supporting points underneath those, I think I've exhausted my verses that are up here. It could be verses 1 through 2, 3 through 5, whatever it is. It just boxes me in, so my whole focus is here. I'm going to use this illustration. Maybe this won't work really well. But I saw a drawing style that I never got good at. But I thought it was an excellent idea, and to me it helps picture some of this. Let's say you've got a person here. Okay, this is a person. And you want to draw it. You could sit down there and just draw it. Okay? Some of you could do it. Me, I would do it, but they would be all proportional. It's like, what kind of angle are you looking at this person with? And that doesn't look like anything like the person I saw. The style that I saw in high school was you put it in and you put it in a grid over top of it. So you take your initial picture and you put it in a grid over top. Has anyone seen this one before? Some of you have. And then, when you're drawing your picture, you kind of draw out the grid, kind of really lightly, and then you focus just on this square here. And you draw it as close as you can to what you see there. And then you go to this next square, and you mimic it. So that by the time you're done, your proportions should be right, your details should be right. I'll be honest, it didn't really work well for me, but it was an interesting idea of how to then reproduce a picture. And the best way to do it is to break it down a little piece at a time, and that's exactly what we're doing here. We're taking a couple verses, we've gotten the structure figured out. We don't want to be so narrow right from start one, I'm going to start here in all my studies. You'll bog everybody down that's trying to listen to you, and odds are you'll get lost yourself. This is just a general structure that we're going to hang things on. If you look in your notes, I like underneath the outline example I give here, this has been written by John Stott, who was, I think, an excellent exegete. It says, John Stott makes the point that just as bones without flesh make a skeleton, so flesh without bones makes a jellyfish. Using the same metaphor, he argues that neither bony skeletons nor wobbly jellyfish make a good sermon. But that's really right. We want structure. You could just have point after point after all my thoughts around the text, which may or may not work well, but odds are it's not going to work well because you need to force your structure. You need to force your flow as you're working through it here. Let's see. We've had a couple others come in here. Did you get the native notes here? And Nicole, I've got them up here too if you want to get a copy of today to follow through. So I think it makes sense. If you have a bunch of thoughts, but they're not built on a structure, that's the jellyfish. You kind of move from here to here to here to here. Or if you have just a structure, and the first thing the text says is this. Now supporting that is this. And one other idea with that is this. Now the next thing the verse is saying is this. And supporting that is this. You could do that. But it's just like preaching a skeleton. It needs meat. And this is our skeleton, and we get to then build meat on it. Give it some depth. Give it some structure. Talk about it. Work through it. Illustrate it. There's all kinds of things that you can do once you've disciplined yourself to stay focused on a portion of the text. Which square are you in at any given time to make sure you reproduce it accurately and then run with it a bit. Just make sure your supporting points actually support, and they're always in context. Okay? Here's, again, the basic outline structure. I'd like you to follow something like this. If you want to use little pictures, bullet points to do it, that's fine, as long as you try to work into at least the tertiary level. I don't know how I could stop there. For me, I've always had to have now. I build out my tertiary points. I'm always working here mostly for me. Okay? You get the general idea. And if you don't worry. We're going to work through this in class. We're going to be doing outlining for the next few, at least, weeks, maybe longer. You're going to keep doing text after text. I'm going to give you homework. Next week, we'll start with outlining a brand new text together in class. I'm going to kind of guide you through it, how I think through it, how you think through it. We'll build a few main points, a few supporting points, and then we'll go over your homework again. And we're going to be doing that for a few weeks, okay? So hopefully you're okay with outlining, because we're going to be doing it a while, and I want to make sure you're comfortable with this. You're going to be tempted, and I get it. And there's nothing wrong. You're allowed to expand on it as much as you want. I may have you work out 3 points, and then you end up with 3 pages. But as long as you have your main points, that's all I'm concerned about. But we're not going to get into the detail yet. I want to make sure we're all good at thinking through the structure of a text, or at least how we're going to structure our presentation of the text. So the homework was the Colossians 2, 6 through 8. I wanted you to develop a title and have at least 2 main points and work out at least 2 subpoints underneath each one. Okay? And then try to develop tertiary or sub-subpoints as you are able. Okay? Now what I want to do is I'm going to read the text. We're going to have different one, maybe 2 at a time. How about that? So we expedite our time. 2 at a time come up. So let me erase this. So nobody feels intimidated by my beautiful structure. All right, we're going to do this. All right, person 1 here, person 2 there, to write their outlines. Colossians 2, 6 to 8 says this, at least in the New American Standard. Therefore, as you have received Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk in him, having been firmly rooted, and now being built up in him and established in your faith, just as you were instructed, and overflowing with gratitude. Verse 8, see to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather than according to Christ. Those were our verses. Do I have a couple volunteers to come up and write out your outline? Chris? All right, Isaac, look at this. You guys are brave. Not that it's a scary thing.
Get it over with.
That's the spirit.
Scrutiny, I don't know.
All right. Now, what you're going to find, which I'm sure we're going to find, is some of our outlines will be very similar. They kind of should have some similarity because they are from the same text, but they're going to be unique to us, how I word it, sometimes what I think is a main point versus a supporting point, something like that. And some are going to get real clever with their titles, and some are going to be like, my title is Colossians 2, 6 through 8. Now, on we go. That would actually be acceptable. There's nothing wrong with that, and some are gonna, really build on this, playing off some of the key words in there. Beware lest you be taken captive. That would be a gripping title. Now, that's aiming at verse 8 in that particular text, or walking in faith. That would be a fine because it's verse 6 there. And again, some of you that have really built out a thorough outline, just give us your structure, like we're seeing right now. I know some of you are going to have more than that. That's perfectly fine. I could never critique anybody on that because I would have done the same thing. And we all realize none of this is competitive. The goal is for us to just get our structure down. It's not like, wow, that was a way better outline, than so-and-so's. Whoever so-and-so is. But hopefully we'll play off each other's ideas and think, okay, I kind of see how you got that. Now, if we ever get to a point where we're looking at their outline and we're thinking, I have no idea how you got there, then we might, in the near future, put each other on the spot. Why did you say that? I might ask you some questions. I don't know. I've not done this before. I don't know if I'll be as brutal as my dad was. Brutal, I say that carefully, but that doesn't make any sense. Why'd you say that? Can you prove your point? He would put us on the spot.
For cross-references, is it okay if we just cross-reference?
It's fine to do that, yes. Maybe put CR, so we know it means cross-reference. Some of you are already expanding in that area thinking, well, a good supporting point might be a good cross-reference. That's right. That's good. My goal isn't to so narrow all of us down, we just feel totally handcuffed going into a text. But we should feel restrained going into a text by at least two things. One, what does the text actually say? And second, I need my outline, my structure forced to expose the meaning of the text and walk through it. And as I work down on my sub-points, I can get a little more creative in discussing it and talking it through. How do I make that point? How do I make it stick with those that are here? You might even write in your illustration or a reference to your illustration.
I hope I have enough room, I guess.
Uh-oh.
The only thing I'm worried about. I think I do.
No, this is good. You might have to get on your knees to finish the rest, but that's okay. Now you can already see the obvious difference between the two. Some are using the inspired way of doing an outline and some are using bulleted points.
Oh.
But you'll notice the indentation makes it clear. I told Rick that I already was mocking his outline style in front of everybody, but that I was already seeing that others in the class were using bullets, so. Anyone impressed yet with how legible the writing is? It's pretty good. Some of us have to stop and really focus on making sure people can read what we've written. And again, as we get through some of these exercises, if we don't make it through everybody, or if you're not ready for today, we'll let you do it next week. We're going to keep outlining now. And then I will go through and try to interpret, rather than you having to stand up here, at least for the first few weeks here. I'll go through what I think it is, and then you can clarify. And this is my first time seeing these outlines, most of them. If some of you want to make some of us feel better, you can do a misspelling once in a while. Is this time frame going to work okay for everybody? I'm trying to avoid the the somewhat comatose look. Now, this is the extreme opposite. Now we're here early. As we get more and more class participation, it's going to get easier to stay focused, I think, rather than just listening to me talk and talk. I don't know if my expectations were low, but I didn't expect a lot of points, but here we go. This is a good problem.
Well, I have a problem because I only have one outline. I have two, but I just wrote one.
One's fine. Okay. So all I need is one outline. I should have clarified at the beginning. But thank you, Chris. All right, well, Isaac is finishing and Chris has been done here. Let's go through it, at least how I would interpret it. Okay. And you let me know. No, you're way off there. That's okay. A Believer's Guide to Wisdom. Okay? Can you explain why you chose that title?
Because you see a contrast between two philosophies in the book of Colossians. Talks about true wisdom, which is in Christ. I just saw that there was just the two there. So.
Good. No, it's good. And you went back and kind of thought, where's Colossians going? Context is king. So it helps to have gone, before what was stated and then after what was stated in our verses. So your main point here, you can tell by its furthest left indentation for an outline, then there'll be an introduction here, but again, we won't work on introductions until we work our outlines out. Because as I mentioned last week, you really want to have your outline worked out so you know what you're going to introduce. And in there you can say, now we're going to cover several things today, and it's going to be in support of this. There are varying types of wisdom out there. Conflicting philosophies out there. How are we going to stay on track? So that could be something like an introduction. So walk firmly in the faith. That is verses 6 through 7 because of what's coming. That would make sense. Grow in the knowledge of God. That's an excellent supporting point to this because you're going to now have to explain it. Because you're going to ask, grow in the knowledge of God, and what type of growth is that? And what parts of the knowledge of God? Do I just open up a theology book and go through it? Or is it more to it than that? And of course, it's more to it than that. And in trying to build off of some of the examples that are out there. Building our lives on the foundation of Christ. Okay? Because that's the foundation we're looking for. And you would have to then go through and start explaining it. So, he does use the text to begin to explain it already. Which is, again, the more natural you can keep it, usually the safer you are. So, the foundation of Christ. In Christ dwells all the fullness of the Godhead. He's pulling from verse 9, which was not in our text, but it's coming, so that makes sense. That's a good point. Well, you can run with that. It makes sense that Christ is our foundation. He's in the Godhead. He knows everything. So it's easy stuff to build out. He's the head of all principality and power. That's verse 10. And then he looks like he's referencing 1:16 as well, going backward, which chapter 1 knocks it out of the park who Christ is. Sometimes you're going to find it hard to just stay in your text, because sometimes one of your proof texts is so wonderful, you're going to spend a bit more time. Thus you'll know why I do my preaching style, verse by verse, over an unlimited amount of time in the future. So I get time to, have a little fun, to go out and say, look at the nuances in this particular text. Okay? Another supporting point to walk firmly in the faith is continue steadfast in the faith. Okay, that's an excellent introductory to support that. Okay, we're going to build our lives on it. Now we have to continue steadfast. What does that mean? What do you mean by steadfast? And then how might I think I'm going to do that? Is it to read your Bible, pray every day? Yeah, actually that's one of them. That's not a bad point to make. And then, this is always fun. When you look at something like this, it's easy to think, I don't know how that fits with Thanksgiving. I'm just curious, why did he put that in there? And the significance of what Thanksgiving is in a context like this. Sometimes we're not following these things because we're just not grateful. Next big point, acknowledge a counterfeit wisdom. So it's interesting he started with acknowledge. Acknowledge generally means to admit that it's there, point it out, recognize that it's there. So that's a good way of coming at it. There are counterfeit wisdoms. They'll look wise, but they're competing. Man's philosophy is not truth. Now, you would have to explain this, because some people would say, but some is. I mean, the philosophy of people that have come up of writing, of government, of whatever. So how do you explain that? What kind of truth are you making? Well, that would be a point you'd work out, because you've got to prove some points. This is a good example, actually, of having to prove your point. There are going to be a lot of people say, that's not true. A lot of philosophy is true. What do you mean by this? So you can explain. So philosophy, the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. Okay, sounds like a dictionary definition of philosophy, which is true. So how do you support that in light of this particular text? Because we're being warned, there's one out there, someone could ruin us. It's with a counterfeit wisdom through philosophy. That's one of the things that's mentioned. And then, worldly wisdom glorifies the man instead of glorifying the God of heaven. So that's the angle that Chris wants to take with this particular text. He's acknowledging it's out there, and one of the fundamental problems with the philosophy of man, the elemental principles of the world, is who it exalts. Gives you a chance to explain what they are, but then he's already working on his application to some degree, as far as why you don't want to do it because of what it glorifies. That's my interpretation. I'm sure you had plenty of other things in there. Anything else you want to point out in here that jumped out at you, or do you think that's a fair representation?
Yeah, I think you followed along pretty well with my thought process there. I think I'd forgotten on that point, the first point after acknowledge counterfeit wisdom. Human philosophy is not eternal truth, I guess is what I'm meant to write. But I definitely wanted to spend more time on this to refine it more. And I was making the case of, there's two different philosophies out there. One that's centered on Christ, the other one is man's interpretation of the existence of what knowledge is, reality. And I guess, I was having kind of a little bit of a hard time trying to keep in I don't know. I felt like I was kind of throwing that out there, like it might be a little bit out of place, putting the definition of philosophy. It was hard to make this without, having to explain myself.
That's an excellent struggle. Yeah. And it's exactly what you want, because what it does when you're forcing your skeleton, you're already thinking, but I want to say this, and that's all fine, but force the skeleton first. And then go back through and as thoroughly as you can explain it. Now, while I mention that point, I have another quote in here that's very valuable for some of us who are a bit obsessed with all the details we can come up with. It's Doug McLaughlin, my professor in college, in his notes that he sent me, said this: "We will have to be ruthless in discarding the irrelevant and have the strength of mind to resist dragging it all in." I love that. Sometimes we're going to do so much research, well, I got to include that, I got to include that, I got to include that. But you can totally lose your audience, and you can lose yourself in the depths of it. You're so deep, so in the particulars that you can't pull out. So if you end up getting that point, you can leave it out, or you can break it down if you can come up with a new structure and do a whole nother presentation. That's what I've done over the years. I remember him talking about this. You don't want to get so bogged down by the time you get done, everyone just kind of, what? Now maybe sometimes you sense that with me. I'd rather be a little guilty of that. He said, "This is difficult for serious students of the text to be preached. It is natural for us to think that it is all relevant. We should not discard all the work we've done on a particular text. It should be filed and kept for another occasion. But neither should we feel the necessity to drag it all in. This takes the rigor of a disciplined mind and heart, a selfless disposition which is marked by a deep concern for what is best for the people of God." And that you're trying to work your way through. It is a judgment call on our part. That's one of the most intimidating parts of preparing a message is what to leave out of my study. And I've had that. I've had some wonderful quotes I've not put in. I've had some excellent side points, I think, that are pretty good, but I just don't, because I think they're a little too far removed from the text, but they're still stuck in my head. And then you can always reuse them somewhere else if you wanted to. Okay? I'm going to start on Isaac's while he's finishing up here. But how he broke this out. So look at his title for Colossians 2, 6 through 8. Don't be robbed, cling to Christ. See, already two very unique titles. But you can see instantly, oh yeah, that comes from the text. Absolutely, and that's an angle I want to focus on. There's going to be several other points we're going to focus on, but I want to start that with some type of introduction to the concept here. So point number one, Paul lays out the characteristics of a mature Christian. Okay? That's stating it as it is. Here are the characteristics at a high level of what a mature Christian is. Now, he's adding the idea of mature there. He's presupposing that that's true to the text. Is that a safe presumption? Yeah. Of course it is. That's a very safe presumption. We can say safely that's a mature Christian. This is what characterizes a mature Christian. So he's going to build this out now. So Paul lays out the characteristics of a mature Christian. So first of all, a Christian walks in Christ, and now he's already pulling in toward the end of what it means with gratitude. So he's incorporating the idea of gratitude there, which is totally fine with this, which is good. This is the area he wanted to stress as he's starting to work through his points. That's the fun flexibility. We're still in the text, we're still bound to the text, but now we're just discussing these particulars of the text. So he's pulling in a cross-reference already to help support the main point. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. That's one of the characteristics of someone, and that's in fitting with walking in Christ. Obedience is certainly one of them. And he's going to have to and then explain this, because he's going to come up with sub points, supporting points to his tertiary point, to sound a little more intellectual. Secondly, to support a Christian walks in Christ with gratitude, our lives are patterned after Christ's life, satisfied in doing the will of the Father. And that would then be, I think, in keeping with gratitude. There's the satisfaction. That's why I think you would mean to go with that in particular here. Okay? So you can see how these are great. If you'll notice online, I don't know if I've said this before, I probably have, but when you go to look up my notes from previous sermons out there, if you've ever explored that section, there's a link called Talking Points. That's exactly the title I give in my own mind to all these things. These are talking points. None of my outlines will ever stand alone. They're my talking points. Hopefully they kind of help watch the flow of things, but for me, they give me what I'm going to talk about to the text. So these are what these are, your talking points, and to keep you online. So this is good. So he's now supporting this again. Paul lays out the characteristics of a mature Christian. What's the second way he's going to support that? A Christian thrives on the doctrine of Christ. And in this one, he's going to have to build this out. So, firmly rooted like a tree, firmly planted by the streams of water. That's a cross-reference that comes to my mind also. Firmly rooted. Seems like there's another text that does deal with that. Notice, I don't know if he's going to continue doing this, but he started a pattern already there of I'm making my point in context, and I'm pulling in a supporting text as well. For he will be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that bringeth forth its fruit in its season. That's Psalm 1:3. Being built up, so he's going to explain this using another part of Colossians as to what it means to be built up. Colossians 1:10-11. Is that correct? Okay. Well, that's what I think it means. Now, you may look that up and think, that doesn't support that at all. I haven't looked at it here, but there it is, being built up. And he's going to use this as a support. And this would be a place where you would say, well, what does it mean to be built up? And then when we get more into it, you might think, well, what's the underlying Greek word for built and rooted? And does it mean anything? You don't have to go through and give every Greek word. I don't do that. I just pull out the ones that just jump out at me as, boy, that's an interesting word picture there. And then a Christian thrives on the doctrine of Christ, supporting it in a third way, established in your faith, confirmed to the end, blameless. Well, that's a whole nother point now he's making from 1 Corinthians 1:8 to tie this thought together. And again, the discipline is I'm explaining this in context, and then I'm using other texts periodically to help me work through the text, explain it, and then apply it. You'll find some cross-references will help you apply your text easier. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as your cross-reference really references the text. Second point in this, a present enemy of the faith philosophies of false teachers. Okay, that'll be verse 8. We've got a definite enemy currently now with this. That would be verse 8. So, a particularly deadly enemy to any Christian, thus the warning to beware or look out for is the first part of verse 8 there. So he's going to now build on this. What does he mean with this one? False teachers were successful in getting some to believe lies, robbing them of truth, salvation, and blessing. Okay, that's a thoroughly explained subpoint. Here's the danger there. Of course it's dangerous. Look what they're robbing us of. They distract believers from the only reliable source of truth and replace it with a lie. Okay, that's a pretty strong supporting point. This is the problem. Why? I mean, if it were me then and I was using this outline, I would be jumping off, beware, 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 as the Old English has it, or look out for this one. And these make the point very solidly. And just adding in for clarification, and you can infer this from beware or look out, that they can be hard to spot. Some people, one of the biggest problems they have is they think, oh, I'll spot error. I'll always know it. No, maybe not. That's why the warning again at the beginning of verse 8. So that's a really good breakdown of this as well. And then the present enemy of faith philosophies of false teaching, he's supporting it now in the pursuit of truth. Beware that you don't give undue leeway to traditions of men and the philosophies of the most intellectual among us. Okay, that's summing it up. There's the philosophies, and look out. It's easy to give them leeway, give them too much room or advantage in our lives to start then getting a foothold. And you could play off of that so well. Seed thought ideas and other things like that that you could run with. Okay, so he's supported his second point really well. He came up with a third point. The mind of man is not to be trusted, so hold fast to Christ. So this sounds like a wrap-up point to me.
Pretty much.
So he's going to wrap it all up rather than making a conclusion. And this is fair. Sometimes you'll actually build out a point to then pull everything together. So it looks like he's going to apply this, yes, other places. So claiming to be wise, they became fools. So he's pulling in Romans 1:22. So why? What's wrong with the philosophies? There's a lot of smart people out there. And they even have credentials. They are proclaimed to be wise with all their degrees. So he's going to build on this in 1:22. How do I know the difference between one scholarship versus another? See how you can run with all over the place. Sometimes you might start working through and think, well, this is a sermon all by itself. This is a sermon all by itself. I'm getting too much material. And then you might have to go back through and restructure it so that your flow is correct. So he's now expanding on this supporting idea there. We love to elaborate our understanding of things even while being completely wrong. That's commentary. And it's commentary and a supporting point, but it's a fair commentary. It's now firmly in application there. This is the problem there. We love to just expound on these things, even though we're expounding on our ignorance or expounding on error. There is no authority in human wisdom. Now, that's going to need to do you defense, because some people are going to say, yes, there is. Plenty of authority in human wisdom. What type of authority are we talking about? Prove your point. Sometimes, not that it's always safe, but sometimes it's nice to throw in a point that sounds that everyone's going to react to. We don't want to be too alarming. There once one. Now, hold on. I've said that. Now let me explain it. What are we talking about there with this one? Finally, in supporting of the mind of man is not to be trusted, hold fast to Christ. Now he's making another support point he wants to make. We take his word for it. That's a nice summation there, his word for it. What is his word and why do we do it? So you're going to have to explain the point. So he starts it. His knowledge is unfathomable. Okay, where's that coming from? It's coming from Romans. His salvation work is abundantly sufficient. So we're looking to knock this out. This is why we're more into what Christ's teaching is versus the philosophies of man. And then the fullness of deity in bodily form also now pulling from later in the text, head over all role and authorities, Colossians 3:10 to 11. And that's a fine temptation to yield to. But I know where it's going. I know where it's going. Can I say it ahead of time before we get there? Absolutely you can. You can certainly reference it, because then you're kind of pointing to it. Sometimes it's a good exegetical tool as well as a homiletical tool. This is where we're headed, folks. This is where you'll hear me use that quite a bit. I've always admired that in other speakers, so I've tried to mimic it. I can't, look where we're going. Look where we're going. Now, how are we going to get there? Like if you our Wednesday night studies in Colossians chapter 5, and how I demonstrating how we're getting from several verses, especially down to verse 10. Okay? That was a very good outline there of walking you through. And I'm just asking this in a rhetorical way. Please don't raise your hands. But did anyone have the exact same outline? No. Did anyone have the exact same outline as Chris? No, we didn't. But there's similarities. But you can see how Chris and Isaac came at it from a different perspective. Okay? Let's hope you're all thinking, well, yeah. If you keep thinking that, then good. But I don't want to assume that we all just know something, especially about outlining. I really can't stress enough the importance of outlining. Do we have room for one more person to come up and do a basic outline? I know some of you have a more thorough outline. I'm going to do the rest of this next week. Anyone have a basic outline you want to come up and share? Okay, Joe? All right. By the way, I'm going to work on, see if there's in the budget for the church to get another whiteboard so that we can have this all up here. All right. I will go through it. We've got 15 minutes left, and then we'll take the rest of you and give you a chance next week to put your structure on the board. Okay. Making sure that one works. Yep. I should have given you the trick one, Joe. The one that just fades out as you're writing your sentence. Uh-oh, this is a clarifier. Okay, wow. And we start the sermon with confession. Now the only negative point to that would be if you started and you winged it and you say it to everybody and it's a just flawless, brilliant outline. You're thinking, oh no, we need to study, right? And of course the answer is yes. But this is fun, right? Wow, no enthusiasm at all. Yes, this is fun, working through this, thinking through it. And farther down the line, we're going to finally, when we get through this, we've gone through it several times and critiquing each other to some degree, we're going to finally end up at a spot where we all get to choose a text of our own choosing, and we're going to start to develop a sermon from scratch, and we're going to go over it and over it in class, and then have a time of presenting it before each other, and then a time of presenting it before another group. Just so you know, too, where my mind is going on this one, I'm thinking of a presentation to the church, and then a presentation, whether or not you actually do it, but a presentation of a gospel text that you would give in a place like the rescue mission. Actually, I'll probably start with that one first.
I appreciate the fact that I is doing the same thing I do. You write by hand like a driver following the 60 wheel.
Oh, what? Yes, so do I. I look like I'm starting to swerve out of control, and if you give me enough...
It's all straight and well spaced at the start, and at the end it's all packed way off.
Yes. All right, we can criticize each other's ability to write on a straight line and our handwriting. And that's where we'll stop. But so far, really good, really good. I mean, this is what I'm looking for. We're demonstrating that we can go through a text, come up with a structure, and you see how we're working through the flow of thought. And in the future, well, I'll try to point out too where we might be in danger of straying from our context. Are we or are we not? And if I question you there, can you defend it to say, no, here's how it fits? And then however you explain it, if that scenario ever happens, however you explain it is something you need to keep in your notes. Because you've got to think, sometimes what's helped me is think of the most critical person you can in an audience. Who might be the most critical person out there? And what might they question? Now, we can't let them drive the entire study. But you've got to be thinking, well, so-and-so might say, no, that's just not true. I don't agree with that. You'd be like the Apostle Paul. Remember Romans 9? One of the things Paul does in Romans 9 is he introduces, as it were, an accuser, a critic, questioning these things. Well, why? You might ask. Well, that's a beautiful technique going through. You can ask yourself a question. I've just made a point here. They can be hard to spot. Really? Why is that? How can you demonstrate that they can be hard to spot? And we build on it there. Okay, Joe, this is already way better than it should be for someone who's started it this morning. I'm going to have to make some of these harder.
You probably started at 12 a.m.
Oh, okay, there we go. Yes.
No, 8. On the drive here.
Oh, wow, that must have been fun. The driving and writing at the same time. All right, so that's disclaimer at the top. For a minute there, I thought that was his title. And I thought the title of this is disclaimer?
Should have done the disclaimer for
Notice too what a technique that Joe was doing for his own presentation purposes here. He's already asking a couple questions in his main point that he's going to work out, which is good. Most of us are, to some degree trying to work through a text with our own questions as we're walking through. But the first point, Paul commands us to walk in Christ, to see our faith disciplined and stable. Right? And where do you think he's getting disciplined and stable? My guess is they follow. I haven't read it yet either. We're all saying this in real time. Rooted, built up. So that would certainly fit with that. So why? Why is he doing it? Well, there's an interesting question to start with. Why is he doing this? We know part of that's going to come down in verse 8 as the answer why. And then, so why or how? So he's trying to answer that question. Because you've received Christ. That's why he commands it. Isn't that supposed to be obvious to people? Why would you continue in this? Because you've received Christ. And what are the implications of that? What are the ramifications of that? That's good. You've received Christ by faith. That's an important distinction, because a lot of people think, well, yeah, I've received Christ. I just felt really good one day, and I saw a spirit, and that's how I received Christ. No, it's in faith. And he's going to have to go through and prove his point under there. Number one, you've received Christ in faith. Like, what does it mean to receive Christ? What is faith? That would be a key thing. A lot of people, you've got to be careful when you're presenting. A lot of words we'll use, people don't know what they actually mean. Like faith, righteousness, justification, things like that we need to explain. Second, so you should walk in Christ by faith. So he's going to just go back and reiterate then what that means once he's explained it. You've received him in faith. So since you've received him in faith, your walk, that would be your life, right? That's going to need to be explained. But your life is to be lived in faith. Receive in faith, you continue in faith, right? That's just a restatement of that first part of verse 6, which I think is an excellent way of coming at the text, even though we just winged it. That's good. Because you've been planted and are growing, what are the ramifications of that? How are you going to answer the because? So he put it this way, because this is how it would work with what he would want to explain if he was standing in front of a group. Now remember this too. Your outline is your outline. Most people, the overwhelming majority of preachers out there, never hand out their outline. Never. I do it as a speaking help to help keep people engaged, and it just helps me keep other people following me, I think. But by and large, most people will never see your outlines. Your outlines for you. For you. So you can put all kinds of interesting words in here. So he's answering it answering the why. Because you've been planted and are now growing, number one, we were instructed to be established in faith. Well, how does that going to be work? And what does that mean to be established in faith? That's going to need explanation. So again, if we were taking the next step with Joe here, I would say now, prove it. We were instructed. Where's the instruction come from? And again, what does it mean to be established in faith? And it might be another sentence or two sentences. Secondary, supporting because you've been planted, we were instructed to grow in faith. Well, how am I supposed to do that? How do I make myself believe? Again, sometimes when you're building an outline, you're going to bring up a point that you don't know the answer to yet. That's perfectly fine, as long as you don't leave it there. It's perfectly fine. So I would say we were instructed to grow in faith. How am I supposed to do that? Okay, that would be a great thing to work through. Second main point now. Paul warns that no one takes us captive. Okay, that's a fair handling of verse 8. What does that mean then? How are we going to do that? Point A, according to the traditions of men, which he breaks down in three different ways. What are the traditions of men? Philosophy is certainly foundational, a tradition of men. Empty deception. Well, who comes up with it? And by the way, I'm presenting empty deception today. Why did Paul word it that way? And you're going to have to explain them what that is. And then elementary principles of the world. Okay, what's that talking about? Well, what are the elementary? I mean, if you look in the Greek or your lexicons, it's going to talk about the ABCs. What does that mean? You have to explain it. And then according to Christ. And he, of course, uses the negative in the text. It's not according to Christ, and there's a problem there. So that's where he stopped, he says, in his notes to work that out. What does it mean to be according to Christ versus not being according to Christ? That's a beautiful term. If you look under the underlying Greek word there for according to, it's a very simple word to explain it there. Okay? Now, those of you that haven't given your structural outline yet, your first one, we'll have you do it next week. Same time. I want you to just put it up here. We'll walk through it again, but you're not going to just fine-tune that during the week. I have homework for you. Here's your homework. You get to do it again. And we're going to do it again. And we're going to do it again. If you want to build on it more, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to make it your Bible study and you just work out all these points more thoroughly, that's fine. You don't have to, because I'm going to want your main structure up here as much as possible. Here's your homework. Outline Romans 3:21 through 26. Okay? Beautiful text. Foundational to salvation. Romans 3:21 through 26. First, create a title. A few words to describe the overall focus of the presentation. Now, before that, I didn't write it in your homework, but make a note. Restate the text in your own words. Okay? I really want you to do that. Restate the text in your own words. How would you reword it? I don't have it in your homework, but don't use that as an excuse next week not to have done it. And then we're going to build out this outline in the following weeks after. We're going to spend a bit more time on this one also. Have at least 3 main points. At least 3 main points. Preferably more, but 3 is the minimum. Those are main points. And work out at least 2 subpoints under each one. At least 2. Build on each subpoint with tertiary points, subpoints, and if you want more. And I'm looking for your structure, and I'm looking for the words that would be, your structure would be that you're now going to have to go through and explain with each one. All right? It's a great text. Now, all of you should have had this first one done, and we're going to catch that up next week. And then we'll go through, and if we have time, start then the Romans. We're going to be doing this a lot in the next several weeks. You guys good with that? All right? And we might start questioning more and more as we're moving along with some of this. So some of you, if you want to help me out making a mistake, I'm joking, but make a mistake and we'll build on it. We'll critique you on it. I might come up with an outline that demonstrates something not quite right. So that's hard to do, I hope. Okay? Very good. All right, just get your homework down. If any questions, you want to run anything else by me through the week or whatever, you're welcome to do it. I appreciate looking them over, and then we'll work through the rest of these in class. You're dismissed.